Hello, everybody. Welcome to Dwarven Forge Live. We got a bit of a special stream today. We're joined by B-Dave Walters and Jennifer Kretchmer, two longtime veterans of the D&D community, both as players, both as DMs, writing, doing basically everything when it comes to actually putting together and running these adventures. We thought it might be fun to talk today a little bit about. Oftentimes we'll hear, do I really need terrain for cities? I don't really do encounters there. Is there any point in doing city encounters versus dungeons and caverns and stuff like that? And I thought, who better to discuss the challenges and opportunities that urban encounter design exist than some of the best in the business and some of our friends. So we brought them on, and Tyler's also here to help. And we might do some table demos with some pieces if we think that'll help. What?
Yeah,
Tyler's also here.
You're like, here's some people that know what they're talking about.
And we also got no, we're good.
Thanks, Tyler.
He's the hands. He's been my DM for like 6 years, so there's also that.
That's true. We've done a couple of city encounters too. Actually, more than a normal amount. Anyway,
yeah, our campaign was actually very city
urban based. Yeah, for sure.
Start off. Why don't we tell them a little bit about yourself? We'll start with Jen, and then go over to B-Dave. Jen, what do you do? Where can they find you?
Yeah, hey, I am Jen Kretchmer. You can find me on the socials at DreamWisp. You can find me streaming on Twitch as DreamWispJen. I'm in the cast of Children of Erte on Demiplane RPG, playing with Deborah Ann Roll and a bunch of really phenomenal folks. I do all sorts of different shows and streams and systems. I've been playing D&D and other tabletop games for more than 20 years. DMing for most of those. I wrote on Candlekeep Mysteries for D&D. I've worked on Starfinder. I've worked on Haunted West. I'm working on a couple of things right now that I can't name yet, but cool stuff that I'm very excited about. And I love games. I love systems. I'm the creator of the Accessibility and Gaming Resource Guide. I do a lot of disability consulting. Was part of Galesong, helped design the Accessible D&D kit that came out in December. All sorts of fun stuff. So I'm really excited to be here. Because
so only ask you about the things you can't talk about, right?
Only ask about the things I can't talk about, and I will just...
This entire stream was a setup. Try to get you to break NDAs.
We got him!
True.
Yeah, but I literally, as we were getting ready for this, I kept getting distracted by shiny toys and just going, ooh, that's what we're saying.
I love your backdrop, too.
Thank you. It's an actual physical thing.
Yeah.
It's not even green screen.
It's done with practicals.
Only practicals in this house.
Yeah.
And then
like minis. See that? We're already starting. You're already starting. None of that digital backdrop. Hard canvas. You know?
6x8 that takes up half your living room? Yes, please.
It's
if I can't see, smell, and touch the paper, it doesn't exist.
It's true. There it is. We're all retro like
if you were gonna give a letter to a player, like as a come on, Chris, don't give me that.
God.
Exactly.
Oh yeah, no,
all
props.
practicals.
Yeah. Oh yeah, props are I'm big on giving props to players and having that as part of my game. 100%.
Props are a ton of fun.
It is I, B-Dave Walters. You can find me all over the socials at B-Dave Walters. If you ask me about anything I can't discuss, this will happen. That's how you'll know. And yeah, just fade out. All over the place. You can find me wherever fine streaming content can be located. Recently repped the Black Dice Society for the D&D Twitch and YouTube channel. Invitation to Party on G4 TV was the DM for the cast of Stranger Things for Netflix Geeked. Recently released some tutorial programs about how to play at a high level, DM at a high level, or write at a high level, all of which are pinned at the top of my Twitter.
Beautiful. I also put both of their Twitter handles in the chat as they introduced. And I think you also have basically similar tags on all the other platforms as well, yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Perfect. Well, why don't we open up with... just in general, how do you generally feel about city campaigns or sessions in your prep? Is there a way that you prefer to prep for them? Is there anything in particular that you like about them or you find challenging?
Dramatically underused. I think that cities, because in a city you can do anything from having your dungeons located there, if you want to go traditional, dungeons, caverns, and underground caves and whatnot. But more than that, I think cities have so much character. They can be so unique and defining in giving texture to your world, for intrigue, for politics, for setting up larger conflicts if you don't want to go to sort of a lot of the default scenarios that people often fall back on. They're great locations for heists and mysteries and exploration. And the other nice thing about cities, especially when you're working with minis and props, is that they stay the same. They don't need to move around. You don't have to have anything that's going to necessarily be shifting if you don't want it. You can do that build and leave it be, and it can live the way it is. And you can just have districts, like you look at something like Waterdeep, and that alone could house, I don't even know how many hundreds of campaigns. There's like thousands of buildings in that. Someone did a practical build of it at one, I don't even know the scale, but it took up an entire basement. And the buildings were, this big. There's so much you can do with it. So I always like to think about sort of the power structure of it. What's the government structure? Who are the forces in conflict? But also, what's the everyday life of a person there? What's the technology level? What's unique about that city that gives it a flavor different to every other city in the region? And how does that culture of that city inform the story you're telling there?
One of the things that I often say is there are surprisingly few Dungeons or Dragons in Dungeons and Dragons. I actually think cities are probably the most common place people play, if only it's the tavern where everybody meets before you leave the town. In everything that Jen just said is true. Again, on Invitation to Party, the whole thing was set in Waterdeep. I mean, that's fantasy New York. You can have anything there. And that's not even counting Neverwinter and Baldur's Gate or anything you homebrew anywhere. If you just pull it together. And I think that the number one value of this set in particular is exactly what she just said, is the fact that once you've assembled the city that is even their home base, you don't have to do anything else with it again. I mean, I love the dungeon sets and the swamp sets and all the other things, but it's one of those things that's like, how much of the campaign's really going to be out here? You know what I mean? And the time it takes to put it all together versus having something that can just kind of like live and be there forever. And then you can see it change. Like something can happen where like that building burns down and then you take it out and it's gone, and like there's a sign of the consequences and the mark that you left on it. And I think all of that is incredibly cool. Yeah, I think there's kind of, I'd say, honestly, more than any other setting, there's no real limits to what you can do in a cityscape for certain.
And one other thing that you can do with cities that you can kind of do with other areas, but it's so much easier, is you can just pull from your everyday life as you're building them and no one will know. You can go take your own neighborhood and lay it out, not even have to worry about how you're going to build your map, because you're just walking around the block and assembling that in your city. And it's a secret shortcut for when you're low on time or imagination.
Another thing that I will tell you is really great is in the very first stream I ever did was a stream called Theogony of Kairos, where they were level 0 characters and they were given powers by the gods where they became level 20 characters. But I spent a lot of time bringing the town to life so that when I imperiled it, it meant something. Yep. So if you've got like, here's the walls and here are the guards on the walls and you know their names and stuff, and then you're like, great, cool. And you array a dozen orc minis up on the top of the wall all of a sudden, yeah. Like that is going to hit very, very, very different.
Yeah. And you can just build such texture into that. If you think about the actual layout of the buildings, how tall they are, if you connect them on the roof, if the walkways are on the ground, if you are looking at, different modes of transport from place to place, if you're looking at having certain types of businesses, there's so much you can do in terms of those ideas that really add that flavor and that character so that those characters really come to life too.
Right. So do you think,
I'll say this one, let me just interject this one last thing and then I'll stop rambling probably temporarily, is again, I think this type of thing really rewards that creativity and really rewards the time investment to be like, I'm going to put the hidden wall here. I'm going to put the trap door here. Stuff that may not pay off for a really long time, but is going to it brings so much more to life when they realize there's a false wall in the temple type thing. And they were like, was that always there? And you're like, yeah, that was always there. Or maybe it wasn't always there. You still get to do whatever you want with it. Yeah.
Maybe they accidentally dropped, maybe there was a false wall there. And then 2 weeks later they show up, and what do you know? There was actually a false wall there.
Yeah, you were like last time, you just didn't pass the check to find it. But today you did. Hooray.
so out of curiosity, there's a really good point. The idea of like, with cities having personalities and you being able to kind of have them develop an attachment to it so that it means something when it gets endangered. Versus, you know, I mean, if they go into it's hard to like feel a certain way about a cave, I guess. But like, what do you think are maybe not easy, but efficient ways or effective ways to have your players develop that bond with a city or a location? Is it NPCs? Is it locations? Is it having it be a useful resource? What do you like to give your players to make them feel something for a city?
I think first, I do think it's the people there, because ultimately it's the experiences you have that matter, but you have to have someone you're interacting with that you give a damn about to make it matter. Like, you can build a temple, but it's not until it's the Temple of Umberlee, you know, with the odd priest and priestess that they have to interact with, and and offer alms at low tide to buy Umberlee's mercy for another day, that suddenly now it means something. It's the same as anything. Any building is just a building until you breathe the life into it of what's taking place there.
Yeah, I think that if you think about part of the reason that the opening sequence of the Disney Beauty and the Beast is so effective is because you get a sense of the rhythm of that city and what's normal. And every single character you meet has a personality. There's something unique about them. And if you can bring that into your characters, you'll see which ones your players connect with. And if you set up those rhythms, the low tide alms, if you set up this is the time that the daily paper comes through. This is the time when they ring the bell for the noontime break, whatever it is, then you also have the option to break that pattern, which sets up whatever is happening that creates a mystery for your players to go investigate. Or if the paper boy who shows up every day that they've decided they adore because he's adorable and bubbling and ridiculous, and they absolutely adore this character, one day doesn't show up, they're immediately going to want to know what happens. But give them options and see what they connect to. And when you see the characters they connect to, those are definitely relationships to build up, because those are the relationships where you can start pulling strings.
The culture of a city, right? Like the culture of how different districts could have different histories, right? Like, we here in New York have some of the oldest American, we got
the best water in the country.
That's what I was going for.
Gotta say, the water in New York's pretty good. The water in New York is
pretty good. It's that, like, we have all these
the bagels and the pretzels.
Yeah, that's
true.
Right.
Exactly.
That's all the neighborhoods, but they just have their own history. They have their own kind of like culture to it all, and I guess that's a thing that I think about a lot in like city building. Is to that exact point of if this shop has existed in this spot for 30 years, is that a staple? Does everybody know who this guy is? Like, does everybody know where this one random magic shop is? And like, oh, you got to go to Del Gringo's. Like, he's the best. Like, he got everything. He's a little weird, watch out, but like, he's great. Like, or is it somebody who's just started up? Anyway, that's it. Like, yeah, the culture of a city seems to deeply affect how it grew and how it shaped, and like how the roads were made, and who actually guards which roads and whatever. It's like it's really fun, and it's a thing that I've desperately wanted to play, like a full urban campaign to just like build out an entire map and do that exact thing. It doesn't have to be water deep sized, but even just the actual, you know, each building has a history, each thing has like a reason for being there. Go ahead. Sorry, B-Dave, you were trying to say something.
I was just saying two things. One, Gaston supremacy. And two, the moment you mentioned a beloved paperboy, I was like, something's got to happen to him. That was the first thing that went into my mind.
Well, you don't know, he's secretly a changeling who's spying for the...
You love Timmy. It'd be a real shame if something were to happen to him.
Yep.
Literally right where my mind went first and foremost.
You imply he's like a changeling, or like this like sweet little paperboy is actually like
super villainous.
I love the idea of like a weird Christmas Carol thing where you get stuck in an alternate timeline where he never existed.
Well, that was the other thing I was going to say about having a city build, is that city can then exist in all of the different realms of reality. So you could have that existing in the Shadowfell. You can have it existing in the Feywild. I mean, the Feywild is a little bit more...
But the two concepts of those two planes, right, is that it's the mirrored reflection of the material. So like, if there's enough, let's just call it, you know, some mental zeitgeist, you know, like there's some psychic resonance that created this. This city is so important to all of these people that it created something on the other side. That's super cool too. That becomes super meaningful too.
And even if you decide you want to make modifications for the realm, you already have the rough structure, which just by pulling that out, immediately players understand something about, oh, this is the same but different. Just without any explanation, without any exploration, they're just already understanding that.
Also, you'd be surprised how easily you can create something 100% new by rotating everything like 90 degrees. You know what I mean? You're like, that butcher shop's over there now.
Or 180.
Like, yeah. Literally turning it upside down, you might say. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
Oh, man. Out of curiosity, so I imagine when you're dealing with pre-written content, do you usually find that that personality or kind of the things that will connect your players to a city, to a location, do you find that it's generally something you have to do a little extra work to establish? Like if you're running like a game set in Waterdeep, do you? I guess what I'm saying is, how much do you rely on the tools provided in a pre-written module versus adding something in of your own to try and kind of tie your characters to the location more securely?
Yeah, I'm one of those folks who will go do another 1,500 pages of research or writing or extra background and have things I can pull on all over the place. So I always am supplementing. But then in actuality, most of the really interesting stuff is what just happens at the table. So I use it as an outline. I use things as suggestions. I use them as guidelines. But I also like to steer things away from that. I like to reskin creatures. I like to pull things in that become, you know, leitmotifs in my campaigns. One of my groups had a band that they were in, and so every subsequent campaign, that band showed up somewhere in the world. Those kinds of things. Finding those little places to put my own flavor and then the unique perspective of the table itself into that world.
I think I come back to the point that it's the people on the streets that make a place a place. Mm-hmm. But you have just easy little things you can do. That it's like they're walking through the streets and they smell something. They smell meat cooking that smells exactly what their mother used to make. somebody walks by with a faded patch from the same ship that you sailed on when you were 16 years old and just set out, saying that you've been here before. Even though we're describing it newly, this is the 4th time your character's been here. And they'll usually say something like, well, is my favorite tavern still open? And you're like, your favorite tavern is still open. You know, it's run by an agoraphobic kobold named Itchy. Because I had an experience. Jen and I had this experience together, actually, where we were playing in a game where we went to Rexentrum. And Rexentrum, I'm going to maintain it's PG-13, but Rexentrum sucked a lot. And it was like, let's go and never come back. Yeah.
I'm traumatized by Rexentrum.
Rexentrum was not a nice place.
Thank you, Matt Mercer.
Even when Rexentrum was about to be destroyed, it was like, good.
Rexentrum, you know? Matt's version of Rexentrum may pale in comparison to ours.
To yours.
Rexentrum was an unfortunate place. But then we went to Hooperduke, and we spent so much time with the gnomes, and it was like, I will die for all of you.
We literally got drunk and had chicken fights.
Yeah, and there was a gun that shot hot dogs. I mean, come on. If that's not the place you want to go and retire, where is there? You know, but that was the thing. It was Rexentrum was very much painted to us as this place that was very crushing and oppressing from the top. And Hooperduke was painted as this place where it's like, here's these people and how they live from the bottom. And it hit completely differently. So I would say that's pending your DMing style. You know, it is a challenge for me because most of my players catch on to the fact that, of course, something bad's going to happen to the paperboy because that's the person I am. So you have to be careful that every once in a while you got to be like, nope, this is exactly as it appears. There were times during the Black Dice Society, even as an aside, I had to be like, okay, check this out. You're going to meet somebody today? I swear they're not a hidden monster. Like, they actually are who they appear to be.
Sometimes
do whatever you want to do.
Door.
Yeah, hand to God. You know what I mean? Then I'm like, they aren't that thing. So you got to mix it up. You know, you got to wave it a little bit. But I will say, more than anything, though, you can't force significance. Mm-hmm. You can't make your players love a place. You can't make your players invest in a place. The only thing you can do is spread out the cheese, you know, bait the traps. They will be like, ooh, what's over here? Ooh, what's over here? Oh, this is cool. Oh, let's go on this mission. You know what I mean? And then just sort of like weave them through it. Because the reality is, if you set up this whole thing and they're like, cool, great. We want to get back to the dungeon. Well, then you got to get back to the dungeon, you know? Yeah. And maybe they'll come back there later.
Yeah, I'm a big, oh, go ahead, sorry.
Oh, I was just one last, I would say more than anything, if you're like, pay attention to this city, and they're like, we want to go to the dungeon, and you're like, but no, the city, that's a problem. You know, if the wind's blowing that way, sail with it.
That's exactly what I was going to say, is you have to be flexible with what your players are doing. If you want to tell a very specific story, you need to write a novel. If you want to play a tabletop game, it's a collaborative storytelling effort. And when your group is wanting to go one way, no matter how much work you've put into the other thing, you got to go the other way. The lovely thing about that is if they didn't investigate all the things, just scoop those up, file them away for later, put them someplace else.
And twofold on that. So sorry, twofold on that is like the idea of there's probably some conversation towards the beginning of your game where you should be talking about like, hey, I kind of want to make a city that could be really fun to play in. Do you guys want to do that? And they're all, actually, I kind of just want to do some dungeon crawling. It's like, okay, great. Then we won't worry about it too much, and I'll put out some cool little cheeses here and there to like have fun while we're there. But I won't worry about it too much then. And second, well, what if the wind blows my dungeon into the city, and it's just some mad wizard is just so hell-bent on this dungeon and this city being in the same place.
Shocked that once we went looking for the giant rats, it kept going deeper. Like what is who'd have thought?
Back to you.
Wild, that.
This actually ties into a question Mixedly had in the chat. saying that cities scare a lot of DMs due to the open sandbox approach. Curious how you guide the sandbox aspect, and I think what they're getting at is generally with like a dungeon or a cave, like you have an entrance and you kind of like go through to the end. Whereas you hit a city, there's buildings all over the place. What can you do to help kind of guide your players towards the things that might interest them? Or do
what I do is, I mean, past a certain point in a dungeon encounter, I know behind the next door is a dragon. You can go left, you can go right, there's a dragon. If you go left and right, if you split the party, there's gonna be 2 dragons. If I need them in the city to find the murdered prince can be in that building or that building or that building. So when you go in there, there's going to be a murdered prince, you know? If there's, for some reason, if I've built something that is very unique and specific, then I would do something like, there's clearly bloody footprints, you know? Like there's, you see the flames of a candle burning in the window that maybe it was knocked over and the building might actually be on fire. You know, you see someone fleeing out the back, you know, like there's ways that you can sort of be like, maybe take a look in this one. But
I would go. Oh, sorry.
Nope, my fault.
Please,
I was
finish.
saying my buildings are Schrodinger's buildings. That's what I was going to say.
Yeah, I think Schrodinger's everything is sort of the best way to everything being liminal as a DM is have ideas, but everything can change in a moment. But where I would probably take it a lot of the time would be ticking clocks. I would give them time to explore, see what they were interested in, have a hook in a couple of different places, but at a certain point, there's a ticking clock on what they're doing, and they have to go for the primary reason that brought them to the city or the primary storyline that I have hopefully set for them that they're interested in. But something will get them, something will be pushing them toward that. Something happens at sundown, something is going to happen. There's an army invading, there's a, you know.
If you go to the industrial district, there is this thing that's going on there. I'm not telling you it's in this building. I'm just, you've stepped foot in this district. I want to have that thing happen around you guys and see what you guys want to interact with.
And so, and it sounds like to a certain...
they've locked down that particular neighborhood. You can't get out now. Like, there are ways to sort of either push them towards something or wall it off once they are in that area to try and get them there. Now, don't get me wrong, they might still ignore it and let the place burn down, or they might, you know, climb over the wall. But usually, and I think this is worth discussing in your session 0 about, you know, sometimes you're going to get hooks. And especially if we're working on something that's a very elaborate build, you're probably being directed toward things for a reason.
Yep.
It's usually in your best interest to engage with that stuff. Like, I'm not going to hide the main stuff you should be, where there's a lot of interesting things to engage with, usually.
So would you say... sorry.
No, please, go ahead.
So would you say in general what it boils down to is kind of planning out the events and the things that you know want to happen, but being not super specific about where they need to take place exactly, and kind of letting it combine with where they go? Or...
Yeah, it's to Jin's point. If you're trying to do something specific, write a novel. You know, for me, I very clearly plan out the beginning of a story, what the inciting incident is. I have an idea of where it should be by the half, and I have an idea of roughly where it should end. But I never plan the back half of anything, because both the dice and the players will surprise and betray you. You know, so you just gotta let it go how it goes. You know,
I'm similar.
One thing I will tell you works really well, especially if you're streaming, but even at a home game, are player briefings. You don't have to tell them everything. Just straight up say, hey, today's the day that you're going to find out who murdered the king. You know, do go towards the dungeon. Don't go towards the mountains. A courier is going to come. Let them say what they have to say before you attack them. You know, just some things that sort of sprinkle the expectations. Like, you may or may not believe them. Let them talk. That sort of thing. At least get everybody rowing in the same direction right from the very beginning.
The engagement.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
We all agreed to the fantasy narrative of this moment. We're saying maybe your character would normally, shoot the messenger, but maybe just not today. Just they're too tired.
Or shoot them. Just let them talk before you shoot them.
Yeah.
They might have valuable information that you want to hear, and if you shoot them, you're not going to get that information first.
Yep.
I think that's all. Yeah, I agree completely, and I also think that. And I just completely lost my. I think it's worth always talking to your players, either between sessions, before sessions, after sessions, finding out what they're interested in, what's drawing their attention. A really great way to do this is you can do stars and wishes at the end of your session, or roses and thorns. People call it different things. What's something you really enjoyed this session? What's something you'd like to happen for your character in the near future and further out in story? And also having your players do the recaps at the beginning of the session, because the things they bring up as things that happened, if they're not consulting, like if they're not note takers like me, where you have a super extensive notes document, the things they remember are the things they're going to engage with. So finding out what's sticking is a really great cheat sheet to where they're likely to investigate.
I just saw the stars and wishes thing too. Like it's not necessarily a new concept to me, but like when it was codified in that way, I was like, oh, I love that. I love the idea of putting that language to it, putting it into a kind of a context, and just in text for a lot of people. There was a table I was a part of with one of my really good friends, and he would do a thing where he would ask the players to recap, but he would also ask, is something going on?
Yeah, you're getting rustly.
Just take it out. I don't need anybody who wants to say Marty McFly. Just say it now because it's gone. He had a thing where he would let the players do the recaps, but he would also say at the end of a session, he was like, "What was something that you, in the Stars and Wishes way, what was something that you liked about the session? Also, let's do the MVP of the session." So it was like, "Oh my God, I really loved." Like it was basically like say one nice thing to another player about what they did today. And I think
I've seen DMs do that with awarding inspiration, that the group gets to vote on inspiration. The only thing I will caution on that is to ensure it doesn't become a popularity contest or disadvantage quieter players at your table.
Exactly.
Because it can discourage people from taking
100%.
action. It can actually make people too scared.
Yeah.
And one other thing. Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, it was like, and most of that was like, let's say something about each person, right? Where it was just sort of like everybody decide one thing from each person. Yeah. Anyway, continue because you're exactly right.
Yeah. One other thing I was going to say on B Dave's how he structures his campaigns. The way I tend to do mine is I also do a really elaborate beginning, and then I sort of have my threads of things that are in motion, and it's an object in motion stays in motion without. I'm forgetting the exact terms of it, but it stays in motion
rest
until...
and stay in mist, unless acted on by an outside force.
Unless by an outside force. Thank you. So I will, my villains will have their plots and schemes, and they usually don't care about the about the PCs until they start getting in the way, at which point things will change. So those things are going to stay in motion, and outside changes are happening to the world, whether the players are aware of them or not. So that can eventually become a ticking clock on what they're doing as well.
Even though this wasn't a D&D, when we were doing Vampire the Masquerade, LA by Night in particular, and still with New York, Jason Carl would often roll handfuls of dice, and he swore he was tracking something. He was like, it's the city. It's what's going on in the city. I mean, I freely admit I'll roll dice just to mess with people all the time. Just be like,
Once in a while.
He swears. He's like, it was never just to mess with us. And he had a record that he's like, these people are moving here and they're moving here and this is all happening. And if you all are lollygagging, the city doesn't sleep,
I've done that to see if characters are changing with lycanthropy. To see if I've done that to check phase of moon, things like that. So I've done that where it's been random dice rolls and the players don't know, and I am doing it for something, but I also roll dice for the sake of rolling dice. But to quote Gygax, a DM should only roll dice for the sound they make.
It's true. I mean, that's as I've said many times, the DM screen only exists to be able to fudge rolls for the player's benefit. You know? Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
And
It's like,
I
because I
think
don't
that
need
is
to fudge them to your detriment.
No.
Yeah, I think when you're that brings up the conversation at the session zero about these are collaborative stories. At least the way I play, the way B. Dave plays, and the way a lot of people that we both work with and game with in home games and stuff play, it's collaborative. It's not DM. It's not adversarial DM versus players. It's we're here to tell a story together, and so I think laying that out helps with the taking the hook, taking the bait, trusting that we're going to lead you on something interesting. Whereas when you're playing with someone who's an adversarial DM who wants to punish the players, wants to punish choices that aren't the thing they were hoping that someone was going to make, that's when players really, that's how players learn not to trust the things that are put in front of them. So conversation and communication becomes a huge piece of that. And I think a lot of people underestimate what a powerful tool that is for getting your players to engage.
Yeah, that is the worst. To Jen's previous point, I've been playing for more than 30 years because I'm way older than you think I am. And you know, that's the way the game used to be. It was adversarial. It was PvP. The DM was actively trying to kill you, and you were actively trying to survive, and that was the game. And I think the most beautiful evolution of this whole pastime has been becoming a story we're telling together. And I would say that that does cut both ways, though, especially if you are telling a type of story where you've laid out multiple hooks. And you might think the murder of the queen is what is most interesting, but if they really want to know why the paperboy disappeared, it's like, well, okay, you have two choices at that point. Well, you have three choices. One of them is a bad choice, to just force them to investigate the queen when they want to know about Timmy. That's the wrong choice, but it is a choice. The second one is to either let them go and find out what happened to Timmy to whatever end, or three, ideally find some way to hook what happened to Timmy back to what's going on with the queen. You know, and make it all work, because it is a story that you're telling together. And sometimes you have those unintended consequences that I've had that happen, where there's just a certain NPC that they fell in love with and kept going back to and asked to come along with them. And then suddenly this person's story really matters and continues to evolve. I was a 4th edition refugee, so I went and played Pathfinder for a few years. And I mean, I ran a Pathfinder game from level 1 to level 20 in all 10 mythic tiers. And in that game, we had a character who was secretly evil and was secretly charming all the NPCs they met. Like, we were rolling secretly because they told me they were doing it. And so a lot of the bad guys they encountered, they wouldn't kill the bosses and NPCs. They would cast charm on them and literally get them to join the party and be with them there. Because in Pathfinder, charm literally lasts for like days. It was ridiculous. And like, once you kind of were charmed, you were just stuck. And but what I ended up having happen over the course of it were some of these like monsters, like literally demons that they kind of overpowered over time, became real friends and real comrades as they had like fought together and bled together and, you know, been through so many things together.
Because the experiences
so
are still
much
real.
So that
that's so cool. Yeah.
Exactly. Well, what this person didn't realize is there was a succubus they charmed named Karanda, who's still my favorite NPC of all time, because I just played her like a spoiled valley girl. The succubi can cast charm person at will, so the succubus was also charming everyone else, but they were doing it in the service of the player character. But the charm broke on her before it broke on everyone else. And that was kind of the day that player had their come to Jesus, actually. But I still sort of filtered it through the lens of like, well, you all have kind of become my friends now, so you all need to know what he's been doing to you. And then that all, you know, came to roost. But that was a detourist way to say, follow the players and what's going to interest them. And to the best of your ability, say yes and if you have to say no, because the game has rules for a reason, at least be like, no, but. like the question I will always ask, if like somebody says, it's been newer players tend to want to do this, but not always. They say something that is just wildly not how a thing works. It's just, that is just not how that thing works. Like a paladin's lay on hands is not raise dead, you know, like it just isn't.
I call it a moon jump.
What is your intent?
If I roll a 20, can I jump to the moon? And you're like,
right.
In a very extreme circumstance with special boots and an air suit and all of these other things that you've assembled over the last 22 years, and like,
well, and it's like,
yeah.
In that exact example, can I jump to the moon on a 20? It's like, well, what are you actually trying to accomplish? Because it's not jumping to the moon. Are you trying to get out of where you are? Are you trying to find out something about the moon? Are you trying to jump so high that everyone will remember and tell your story? You know, like there's ways that, you know, like we can be moving in the direction of your intention, even if you don't necessarily expressly get the thing. You know?
Yeah, so. it's the I don't know. Have you asked your mother? Yeah.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, and you can. I think a lot of times people underestimate how easily you can flavor things, especially combat, because combat gets really boring really quick, to tell you the truth, because the only hit point that actually matters is the last one. And you very quickly can fall into a hit, miss, crit, hit, miss, critical miss. You know what I mean? Like, you can juice it up a little bit. You can, it's like, I want to swing from the chandelier and flip in the air and shoot an arrow at him. It's like, okay, give me athletics and then give me your attack roll. And if you succeed at both, guess what you did? Okay. You know, nowhere is it written that's a thing, but it's going to bring it more to life in their mind, which is the whole point of these terrain and minis and things, is to help bring the thing to life. So yeah, let them have stuff like that. It's like when you cast fireball, is it not a fireball? Is it actually like a gust of wind because you're the emissary of Aeolus? Yeah, all right, okay, fine. You know, like whatever. It's all the same.
On character, everything was flavored after marine life, marine species. I reflavored something as a mantis shrimp punch, so it's a double impact. So one is the force and one is the lightning. I can't remember what it was. I'd have to look at my character sheet. But everything I did with that character was reflavored in that way. So it was the same net effect, but the process of getting there was unique to that character. And for me, that's a lot of the fun of it now. Is I'm like, I know these mechanics. It's now more fun to come up with how my character uniquely does those things, whether that's as a DM and figuring out how a villain's using something, which confuses the players as to which abilities they're using. So your longtime players are going, wait, what is that? How did they do that? What's that?
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Which always is a nice twist, because it's always fun to surprise people who think they know everything about the game by doing something really basic. You know, you throw a reflavored magic missile at someone and they can have no clue what's going on. And that's just a delightful moment, because when afterward you clarify with them, they get very excited by that possibility, and all of a sudden you'll see them start to flavor their stuff because they have discovered you can.
I think it was Gabe that tweeted recently. He's like, I will repeat again, give human enemies monster stats.
Monster stats.
Yeah, I was like, yes, 100%, full stop, do it. Because it's that thing where, you know, if we wanted to tie it back to City, was that if that shop wasn't a magic shop before, but they're like, you know, I'm really looking for this kind of thing, you're like, yeah, this guy, he's got it. He's got it, and that's where, and you guys will
actually a monster in the form of a shop.
Yeah, exactly. It's like, you know what? Hell yeah! Like I wanna do that, and what that will guarantee is, again, their attention and their decide, like, oh, there is this thing here, perfect. Like that's all I wanted to do. I just wanted to try this thing out, and it's the engagement, the excitement with that thing that's gonna matter.
And that's when you find out the shop is a mimic.
Right? Or any other number of things. Like, that's where you take a dragon and restat it, and it's all of a sudden it's a shop dragon.
Which
is everybody's new best friend, because it's kind of, you've taken a gold dragon and reflavored it, that instead of becoming a person, it can disguise itself as a shop that sells helpful magical items. Like, there's just all sorts of fun twists you can put on it. But I think one of the things that Keith Baker does that I really love is, in every location you go to, sometimes he'll give you points of interest.
Yeah.
So it's less than having to do the investigation process. And I think you can take this on a micro scale or a macro scale. So for a city, if you don't want to have every single shop laid out and NPCs and items and all of that stuff prepared, you can say, these are the points of interest. I am being completely upfront with you. These are the places that are worth visiting. The rest is kind of, it's a little video game style. It's a little Silent Hill, where like you only can go in certain places. Everything else is boarded up. But that sort of idea of like,
yeah.
Yeah, I would say for people that are considering doing this and are afraid that it's so overwhelming, if I have to build every building and keep track of every building and then fill every building, it's like, no, you don't. Again, they're placeholders until somebody goes there. And if you don't have time, you know, the door is locked. Well, if you want to pick it, okay, now it's a house. Again, it's Schrodinger's building. The potentiality collapses now on the fact that it's an abandoned shop. Okay, you know,
exactly.
It's a house.
It's abandoned because somebody moved away 2 weeks ago.
Yeah.
And
so
then
like,
the
this
only,
is just
the only
somebody's
open store.
Yeah, this is somebody's house and you just super broke into it. Yeah, exactly. Now here comes the town guards. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. One of the other things you can do is you can think of, I'm sort of jumping around here. My ADHD is gonna ADHD. But each different region of the town, each different district can have its own major story thread, and then little threads that weave into that. So every shop, every piece of the puzzle can be picked up from a different location to sort of solve that strand of the larger story, which means you don't have to come up with, if you take the idea of what's happening there, the general idea, then you can just sort of untangle one piece of it for each place and save yourself. It sounds like it, the way I'm describing it, I feel like I'm making it sound like it's a lot of work, but it's really less work because you're just coming back to the one idea.
It's less linear. You have the opportunity to say, this is not a strict timeline. This is, we are engaging with these. Sorry, Chris, you're trying to.
It kind of makes me think of clocks, like of designing that way, where you'll have like a clock in each area, and it's like when you go and you do this thing, it pushes like the events.
I thought you meant like a. Continue.
Oh, like the
cogs and wheels.
The Coldplay song. No, no, just like the concept of like having like these are the different stages of evolution that like this area will go through or something as they do things here, and when they do this thing, it'll move to the next stage of that like storyline I had like planned out or something, and just kind of like having like a list of, I guess, the evolutions you would want for each of those neighborhoods. And whatever order they do it in, like if you just like make a list for yourself about like the things that could happen, then it's not a ton of work in the moment.
Yeah, the Alexandrian has a really great article about the 3-clue rule for mysteries, and I think that's something that you can sort of build out on that idea of, you know, for every mystery you want someone to solve, you need to have 3 different ways that they can get the same clue, so that there's really no way you can miss that piece of essential information, because you never want to put essential information between a lock pick or a skill check or something where people aren't going to get that information. So you lay it out in 3 different places, and that way also if they miss it in one place, they pick it up somewhere else. And so I think taking that idea and using that to lay out pieces of a story, that gives you, 3 different things to put in places already in one district.
Way back in, oh, sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
Way back in the day, there was an adventure. This is back during the 2nd edition times, but during the dark times, before the coming of the Empire, where there was an adventure that they were heralding as the hardest adventure ever. It was, I think it was Return to the Temple of Elemental Evil, I think, but don't quote me on that. But they were quoting how hard it was, and it turns out it was literally impossible, because one of the things you had to do while you were going through the dungeon was find these keys, and because of a misprint, one of them literally wasn't in it. So you couldn't fix it. And they published an errata in Dungeon Magazine where literally they were like, it was supposed to be in the ashes in the fireplace type thing, but it wasn't there. And there was no other way to do it whatsoever. And this was pre-internet, you know, back in my day, you know, so I imagine there's some people that were playing at their table just like, the hell is up with this dungeon, man? Like, and especially because they'd hyped it as the hardest thing ever, you're like, well, we must be missing something. Yeah. It's like, no, you're not. Yeah, you're not.
Well, any DM who's reading through the book and then just like, oh, there's not a third key, huh? That'll be solved.
Try to prep it, and you're just going, wait, what?
Yeah, you're like, I must have missed it when I was reading.
You have to do that much prep, so it was.
Yep. You were like, it's in here somewhere. I just didn't see it, and it's like this narrator voice. It is not. Yep.
I also always recommend people picking up Grand History of the Realms. You can get it on DM's Guild.
Yes.
But it's, if you want to get a sense of different flavors of cities, different layouts, each different location feels so different. And by reading through it, you find the little pieces that make each place unique. Thinking about tiny details, like what kind of food do they eat? What kind of clothes do they wear? What's the weather like? I always start with how far are they from water? That's sort of when I think about the location on the map, because if you can't get water, you're going to need to find ways to get water. What does that look like? That all trickles out into your architecture, into your, every little piece can be, if you want, you can take the little things and build out from there. And some people like to take the big ideas and build in from that.
I don't know if someone...
you want just ideas.
Oh, go ahead. Sorry.
No, finish your thought. I'll remember what I was going to say.
I don't know if someone has come up with a proper term for this, like a proper terminology, but I don't think I've ever told you this. I love having sort of like how PCs, like player characters, have like breakdown, or for an NPC you might have a breakdown of their goals, and like, okay, this is what this villain really wants, and so every action that they're doing is to satisfy that thing, like it is to satisfy that action, this thing that they want to occur in the world. I love having a city have that same goal. What is this city's goal? What do they want? What does this like entire place want? And so how has that changed over a history? Like, what was the thing that got them to the next part, which then gave them a new goal, which then got them to the next thing? Like, for instance, like speaking of like, if they have to find water, it's like, great, that's goal number one. They started with, they needed to find a way to get water. How did they do that? And then go from there. Sorry. That was
I just put it, sorry, go ahead.
No, finish your thought, because I might say something unrelated.
I just mentioned in chat, too, that I loved Journeys Through the Radiant Citadel because it set up so many different new worlds and locations, and with information. It had gazetteers for each of those locations, and they all felt so different. The texture of each of those locations was so different and so special and unique, and you got cool festivals. Almost every adventure in there had festivals and good food.
Yeah.
I want the cookbooks. I love that book.
Say two things to your point. One thing WotC started doing in recent years is including the personality trait, ideal, bond, and flaw for every major NPC. I mean, that's super useful. And like you were saying, having that for the whole city makes a lot of sense. One thing I would say, though, is in this theoretically is something you discuss at Session Zero, is I said previously, don't feel overwhelmed by the minutia, but also don't dive too deeply into the minutia, because that's not the game, and that's not where the game is played. Like I did an interview podcast where the DM was on, and he was trying to figure out how the tide tables would work on a planet with 3 moons, and he'd spent days working on this. And I was like, bro, if that's just your jam, like if you're just super into oceanography, like I'm like, great. Otherwise, I'm like, nobody anywhere is going to say that was a mind-blowing campaign because the accuracy with which the tides came in and out.
But the tides are wrong.
Unless it is just pivotal to the adventure that there's a certain point when all three moons at confluence reveal the entrance to something. But guess when that happens? When you say it does, dude. Because the opposite is, let's say you've decided that 3 days and 16 hours into the game, that's when the portal opens. Well, what happens if they're not there or they haven't figured it out? Sucks. You missed the portal? What? You know, like nobody wants
get
that.
one good 3-hour tour, and that's it. And that's all you need.
A 3-hour tour. Yeah.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen.
Thank you for coming with me on that one.
But also, who's to say that in those worlds physics works the same way and that time is, equal? It's the way that the Feywild time doesn't align.
You can shoot a fireball from your hand, but the tides have to work the exact same way as it does on Earth.
That's where I always end up with when people get overly invested in the minutia of how things work, because I'm like, the moment you introduce magic, all bets are off. There's no logical reason why bat guano is the material component of fireball. So bat guano's explosive, okay, but I can say some words, hold my fingers, and pinch some poop in my hand, and flaming death erupts. Oh, okay. You know, it's like, I usually give this rant when I'm talking about writing, but it is equally true in things like this, where Superman can fly and can shoot lasers out of his eyes. Bugs Bunny can pull a hammer out of nowhere and wallop you over the head. If Superman pulls a hammer out and wallops you over the head, people be like, this is the dumbest thing I've ever seen in my life. Superman can't do that. Like, the consistency is the key. People will accept the rules of the world, but the rules of the world must be maintained. You know, the moment you start to deviate from that is when people get mad at you. As long as
unless you have a reason for it.
True. If that, or like that.
I feel like that's
the
what it is.
story.
You have to have the consistency because the story is when the consistency breaks. I mean, that's what we were talking about. When Timmy disappears, that's when there's something wrong. The rules of the world have changed. And
Timmy was holding the weave together. That's what it was.
That's what it was.
You know?
That's what I love about
Timmy has now
season.
caused the spell plague.
Yeah. It's true. Timmy
Timmy.
caused the spell plague. Yes. So that's the difference between you and me, though. In my world, Timmy did it on purpose. You know what I mean? He's like,
Well, my first version of Timmy was he was a changeling who was a super
True.
spy.
He was also
That is true.
Strings.
Yep.
But
you have verbal, somatic material, and Timmy components to every spell.
Timmy components. That's it. The lesser known Timmy component. Yep.
Speaking of Timmy, we're
doing
gonna,
a giveaway.
Yeah, we're gonna start running. Yeah, we're gonna start running. We're gonna start running our
That was
giveaway.
smooth.
It's for $50 of pledge manager credit to get stuff from our Kickstarter that's running right now, Cities Untold Lowtown. If you want a chance to win $50 of pledge manager stuff to get that terrain, Timmy is the word. So just type Timmy in chat. It's not case sensitive. You can use it in a sentence. It doesn't matter. The word is Timmy.
You
so
can trust the coupon code. I promise.
I think one thing that would be.
Oh yeah. Okay, we had to pay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
I think I think one thing that would be good to get. We got a lot of like really cool like world building discussion in. I think one thing that would also be interesting to talk about is when you do have combat scenarios coming in. What do you think of first when you're designing a combat situation in a city? What about city combat stands out as something that you would then do differently compared to a fight in the woods or in a dungeon or something?
Do you mind if I, right before we answer this question, you may have to repeat. I just want to, I know you said it, and I'm just going to make sure that it's 100% clear. This credit for the pledge manager will not be reflected in the Kickstarter. It isn't until the pledge manager actually happens that you get this credit. So
yeah, when the pledge manager opens, we'll contact you and check your email and be like, hey, is this like what's your pledge manager account? We're going to put the money in there.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I just wanted, you said it clearly. I just wanted to reiterate. Thank you.
Yeah.
It's been said out loud. It's on the record now. Yes. The first thing to me that's different about city combat is collateral damage. Who's in those buildings? Who else is in the street? You know? Do you care what happened to these people? Do the bad guys care about what happened to these people? Because your bad guys don't necessarily have to be fine with indiscriminate murder. Like they don't but maybe they absolutely will fireball an apartment building to cover their escape. You know, that's something you got to know about your bad guys. But that's the first thing that leaps to my mind.
Yeah, which also ties to one of the things that's really cool about cities is law, is that the laws of a city are going to be different and enforceable in different ways.
Right.
And I think that changes how combat works, is it going to be out in the open because you're gonna get busted. One of the things I love to play with for cities is how people get there. How people are arriving at wherever the combat is, what the tactics are, because you have all these levels that you don't necessarily have in a more open space. You have rooftops. I mean, and rooftops, just as a player, it's cool to do a rooftop chase or a rooftop fight because you just feel cool.
Yeah.
You have sewers, you have ground level, you have people shooting from windows across the street. You have all of these different ways. You have people who are disguising themselves as, in uniforms, or however you want to play those things. But you have all of these different options of how people arrive at the site, which also makes it really fun if you have different factions in play going for the same thing.
And to the point that you just made about laws is like, is murder okay? Like, a lot of time people murder hobo this game just indiscriminately. And if you just like find a pickpocket and you just like shank them in the middle of 3rd Street, somebody might have a problem with that. And then what's going to happen?
Dragon Heist it did 2 things that's great for new players. It gave them a codified set of laws that said, hey, you can't kill people and you can't use violent magic, and most people don't walk down the street wearing their weapons without getting some looks. Right. And 2, it gave them a home base very early on for whatever campaign you wanted to build out after that. You built a home base that was interesting, they cared about, and you could have unique character.
And then also not even just the legal aspect of, is fighting in these streets going to get you in trouble with the guards, but also the people you're running into aren't monsters. They're people who also have connections and families, and so if you get on this person's bad side, if you're openly hostile to this person, who is that going to spread to, and then is that going to affect your ability to go into certain neighborhoods or to go to certain businesses? And also, like,
and it's not always going to be the guards who are keeping the peace in a neighborhood. It's often the residents who are keeping the peace in the neighborhood,
right?
Because you don't want to have to deal with the guards. They are not going to necessarily make it a good time. Can you
do this whole combat where neither side wants anybody to discover this combat is happening?
Well, that's what I thought was super interesting with it. You said, Jen, about like organizations and like who moves throughout the city, because there's like this aspect where I just realized, I was like, holy crap, that would be such a fun the disguises. There was the disguises part. I was like, that would be such a fun encounter. I'm walking through, I get to the marketplace, everything's fine, but it looks a little off. Everything's just a little bit weird. And like, the Thieves Guild set up camp in the market stall. They paid off all the people in the thing to attack you. You guys have been messing with their stuff. They don't like it. They're done. And so they, if it's like this whole section of the city, like nobody's going to come here for hours. Like you can, I don't know. Sorry, just the idea
Thieves Guilds are vastly underutilized as well. I mean, if you have a rogue, let them use their thieves' cant, for goodness sake. Make that count for something.
Sure.
One of the things I did in Invitation to Party was they got originally drafted by Laryl Silverhand, which got them on the radar of the Harpers. Then they go and they stop a couple of crimes, which gets them on the radar of the Xanathar Guild. And every one of these groups is like, well, they were like triple agents by the end, because they basically had to like promise everyone they owed a solid and had to keep all that juggling. Yeah, it's the Vice can tighten pretty quick.
On my phone. It's awesome.
Okay.
But yeah, no, I'm big on intrigue right now. I feel like there's so much cool espionage stuff.
How that builds into encounters as well, right? Where it's just like, where is this happening and why is this happening is really cool. Sorry, BD. Sorry to the both of you. I thought
no.
They would interrupt.
Well, I just have a question that I'm sure the people might be vigorously typing in chat. Are we going to get to see any of the table building and showing
Can you
that?
show us
Yeah.
these beautiful pieces?
Yeah, I've been
Please,
thinking about running over and grabbing some stuff to do some demos. In the meantime, I was also looking for some images that we could show as a placeholder while I.
Did you already show that sweet video thing that you showed that captivated both of us so
Oh,
thoroughly?
that was running before the stream. That was
Yeah,
our
it's
that was our
starting
pre-roll.
soon.
That was the
Yeah.
starting soon.
Yeah, let's go ahead and set up. Let's see.
If you want me to vamp, I can just do, Timmy at the newspaper stand for.
I'm trying to look in chat
I
and see
would
if there are
love that.
questions. too.
I mean,
Okay.
I'm all for questions.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Here, I can. I don't have my phone.
So if you have a question, when you write it in chat, just type the word "question" all in caps to make it real easy to pull out.
Yeah.
Well, so I do have one little. I want to switch over to this. This is a kind of battlefield that we set up a while ago, and so I think
all
it's like
those
the main thing with the
levels.
city is being able to put
The
like
big old.
being able to put like fortifications in a lot of places, and so this is like our Warfield Village district is what we've been calling it. So it's literally supposed to be like a wargaming setup generally, but you can also use it for RPGs. And I think that's the thing when you're talking about like where Jen, when you're talking about like how is everybody getting here, just even on this spot, there's so many places for somebody to come in
so
from.
many levels.
There's
yeah.
there's all these different roofs that somebody could pop up onto. They could be inside any of these buildings. It's really
Wheelbarrows
wild. Yeah.
could be hiding inside, and you've got some really cool areas for cover. Like,
Yeah.
it's just so dynamic.
I immediately went to. I'm gonna take out that chunky boy up on the roof up there. Like, leave that guy to me.
Well, 'cause then you
I'm
also
gonna
get
go ask
into
him for
like
directions.
one of my
I
favorite
want to see a
things.
tiny kobold be the one who's doing it.
Exactly.
Yeah. And I think the
Cobalt
verticality is also
supremacy.
just a very fun thing that is involved in almost every city as well. People build their buildings tall. So
Yep.
I know when we were playing Lost Mines like very early on, we were doing kind of the siege of Kragma Castle. There's a point where I climbed up the wall, look up this ladder where like the lookouts were, and then there were a couple goblins up there, and I was like, wait, I don't need to fight these guys. I can just pick them up. Like, I'm bigger than them. I can just pick them up and drop them off the side.
Yep.
And yeah.
Well, we'll be. BA will be right back.
Did something happen?
No, he's just going AFK for a second.
Yeah,
Oh,
just
okay.
AFK.
I wasn't sure I missed something when I was talking. Beautiful.
We saw his chat to us. So
Got it. Okay. Sorry. Let's see.
all good.
Just grab the
Yeah,
Lumber Baron Lodge.
it's
The problem
so
is,
cool.
The
Like,
problem
there's
is,
just so much there.
Right. Well, that actually, if you want to start grabbing some
I'm gonna grab
pieces,
some pieces, yeah.
I actually had a question for you, Jed. Was that because you're talking about what you're seeing there, and you're like, oh, I can already see spots for cover, rooftop chase, or everything. I guess that would be a question that I have for you, and I was gonna direct it to the both of you. Was that what what you're seeing in the system where you're like, oh, that could be really fun, and I would love to try to build something like that out, and I don't know how to, or like I don't see that right now, or could you do this? I guess it's sort of an open-ended question, but that's what I want to ask you.
I'm sorry. Can you repeat it?
Yep, because I need to rephrase it.
I think I get what you're saying. I just want to make sure.
Yeah. It's basically just there's things to be excited about in this. When you build, what are you looking for, and why does this, like, from what you've seen, does that match up to what you like to build, especially when it comes to an urban encounter?
Yeah. I sort of, I mean, I love what I was seeing because I was seeing, for me, I find one little thing and that becomes the genesis of everything.
Got it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I love finding, I'll see a moment or I'll read about a concept and it'll just spawn an entire campaign sometimes. So for me, it's finding those pieces. I work really well when I don't do great when I have a complete blank page. That's when I feel
Gotcha.
lost. I need one thing to grab onto, and once I have that, I have a lifeline, and then I
See,
can.
your answer
trace that.
created the better question, which is where do you start? Which is, it's like if you start with that
Yeah.
concept and build out from that, is that sometimes where you're like, I built this encounter to be multi-level. I wanted to mess around with having to jump up and stuff. Is that kind of in the nature of where it starts for you?
Yeah, I mean, my background is coming out of TV and film,
Mm-hmm.
and writing and producing and performing on that side of things. And so I tend to think about how things are serving the overall story. And after every encounter, I want a character to have learned something about themselves. So I try and create combats and encounters that have a purpose,
Yeah.
where people are going to come out of that having learned something about themselves. So sometimes it's about building in a situation and then figuring out what the physicality of that situation is to accomplish the
Yeah.
characters growing in some way or learning. So if I have characters that just leveled up and I know that they have this cool ability they want to learn to use, that will be emphasized by the ability of leaping between rooftops or swinging from, lampposts, then I will build in lampposts and
Yeah.
rooftops.
I love being
But
Spider-Man.
but sometimes it's you want to have the close quarters because you want it to be experimenting with close quarter melee for characters. It just really depends.
That's so cool to like try to like. It's baffling that I must be. It's that thing where you're like, oh, I'm constantly always learning. I need to be curious because that is a concept that I'm like, why have I never thought of it that way, right? What is this encounter teaching this player about themselves or about the character? Like, what is this teaching about the character? And that's so cool.
Yeah, I think it's something that they don't really talk about that much when people are when DMs are learning how to do this. I don't think it's something
Right.
that's really mentioned often for new DMs or for experienced DMs. But that's, when you're not thinking about that, that's how you get only kobold encounters for level 1 characters,
Yeah.
where that's the only thing you're coming up against, and it doesn't matter where you are. There's kobolds appearing in the middle of the desert or the middle of the ocean, and you're
Right.
going, this makes no sense. But it's because it's the only thing available,
Right.
rather than thinking about what makes sense for these characters to be doing, to be challenged, and grow to a new understanding of
Yes.
themselves and their adventure.
B. Dave, I would love to ask you the same question, which was I evolved it to an actual question, which was thanks to Jen, which was when you build an encounter, do you tend to sort of like focus on a feature and then build out from there, or you're like, I really want these kind of things everywhere, and then you kind of go and work yourself in?
Like I was saying earlier, every session I have a goal of what I hope is going to happen.
Yeah.
And so then the encounters are there to facilitate that goal.
Right.
Like I very, 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 very rarely will be like, you're going to fight a griffin because we haven't had a fight in a while.
Got
It's
it.
like if you fight,
Yeah.
it's for a reason. And if it's a griffin, it's for a reason,
Yeah.
So I think I enjoy, well, I think there's almost 3 manifestations of the game and how it can go. The first, you have pure theater of the mind. Then you have maps and minis and props, but still theater of the mind adjacent, in the sense it's like, that guy's on the roof, I shoot that guy with an arrow. And then there is a third, very crunchy version of the game, of the 5-foot squares and movement and line of sight and flanking rules,
Right.
which those are all 3 different experiences of the game, and there's no wrong way to do it as long as everyone at the table is on the same page that that's the way they're trying to play. Me personally, I'm never doing the third crunchy one. I lived through that.
Yeah,
I know how to
almost
calculate
never.
that go. I'm like, like, unless I mean, if it's something very obvious where you're like, this person dives behind this box and now you can't see them, you know, for
Right.
a reason. Otherwise, that's not really my jam. Although, hey, nothing against the people that is their jam.
Yeah, absolutely.
So it's almost like working backwards. It's like the story necessitates a certain conflict. The conflict necessitates a certain build, basically, for me.
Absolutely. And I guess that was kind of in an interest of saying, like, is there something within a city system that you would like to see from our pieces, or something that I could demonstrate for you guys tonight that would also be helpful? On top of, we've got a build on our table right now, but I'd love to show you guys stuff that you're like, I would love to see, can you do something like this? Was going to be another one that I wanted to ask.
I mean, I want to see this, because I think this is actually a good thing to say, that it's like this doesn't have to be an overwhelming thing. Like,
Right.
you legit could be like, you're walking through the forest, you come into a clearing and you see this.
This
You
one.
know? Yeah.
Yeah.
This one cool thing. Which is absolutely not a mimic. I promise.
No,
Go
it's
inside.
definitely
Go inside right now.
not a mimic.
Not unless we
Or
have
a Baba
$5 million
Yaga
and we can make oh my God, he used the.
Use the bookshelves on the back.
That's beautiful.
I didn't
That's
even realize
cool.
that. You want to see something fun with the bookshelves? You want to show them?
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I'm going to show them in just a moment. The only thing
So
is,
like oh, go ahead.
no,
Sorry.
go ahead. No. I was like, this is just not. Oh, he put a terrain tray down. Good, so I can just lift that terrain tray. Continue, Jen.
I was gonna say this is already giving me story ideas. Like I see the bookshelves, I go, okay, cool. This is like the character who lives here is like this. You know, if we're saying this is in the middle of the clearing in the woods, this is the eccentric librarian who's gone off and left the big city and is now in this house made of books.
Right.
And they're living here. And what are they doing here? Why are they here? What information do they have? Well, they have all of the information.
Yeah.
But are they going to give it
well,
to
why-
you? Maybe not.
Also, if there's a second story bookshelf that's facing outwards, I immediately went to that person's a giant or can fly.
Well, yeah.
Yep.
Also,
Yep.
why would it have a secret door? I don't know if it. I don't know. Why would it ever? Is this in frame?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
Yep.
I, just,
Yep.
I can't. I have no register of where
Yep.
it is. But like,
You're doing great, honey.
why does it have a secret
Oh,
door?
that's so cool.
Right? Like that's the kind of.
Well, because
Because
they're
reasons.
actually also a criminal and need a secret escape route. Or they know that there's someone after them and they need
Yes.
a secret escape route or a way in. There's someone who comes to visit who is not supposed to be visiting and has to have a way in.
Exactly.
Or maybe they're like a fantasy therapist where they have the office at the house, but it's got a separate entrance, and that's the only way you can come in. And that's how they know who's serious, is who knows the secret
Yeah.
way in.
Right?
So is that on grooves that are sliding in there?
Yes. So right now, one of the things is what it'll do. Let me just go ahead and pull that out. Is it will fit within the corner post. It's the size. It's the same size as any of our regular walls, right? In terms of, let me just get my fingers out of the way here. So because it's the same length, what it can actually do is it can actually fit within these two corner posts. And it's more likely you would probably put it like this direction. I think we just pushed it the other way because it was, see both sides of the sculpt on one side of the thing just for visualization.
But I like it the other way. Like, there's story there. There's character there.
These are all
That becomes a jumping
handcrafted
off
resin
point.
prototypes, so they're not quite as precise
Exactly,
as
like-
factory finished stuff.
there is some ad hocing to make sure that like it actually fits within some of the places in terms of
Sure.
this is, but by and large it fits either way. You have character on both sides. You have this opportunity to push the door through when you want to. So yeah, it fits within those grooves, and that's kind of in a larger way, like that's kind of the nature of a lot of the system currently, is how do we interconnect between the multitude of different pieces that we've created. So we'll also have pieces like this, which is our corner post filler. So that spot right there where you're seeing just the bare, no sculpting, just like base PVC, you can all put this right in front of that, and now you have this kind of it's just a pillar, really. It's just a filler that helps like sell the idea of this, actual building, right? How close to reality can we make it? And reality
these-
in gigantic quotations.
Are these compatible with the previous sets, or is this kind of a standalone system?
This is the Cities Untold system is fully compatible with the previous set, minus a couple of features. So one of the new things that we have included within the sets are we're calling it's biscuit holes. So we have pieces like this scaffolding platform that have is that okay,
Yeah,
good.
you're good.
That have this hole in it. It has a, and so then it has this little peg that goes in between each side. And so you can actually put, you slide this here, that there. Those then clip together, and now they become free hanging. These floors, for instance, are new floors versus the old system, and they also have the hole, so then you can actually just freely suspend this platform right here, other floors right there. You actually have the opportunity to do a lot of other stuff, like that's how these railings are sitting here. They're actually pegged into that system as well. So a lot of additional functionality there was what we were going for with this specific Kickstarter versus the old line, which was, hey, this is great. You can make a lot of cool buildings and you can make them interestingly, but this not only breaks the box on, hey, we can only make squares, because we have a lot of other pieces that end up doing diagonals or creating interesting octagonal shapes. So yeah, I hope that wasn't an over-explanation, but it's basically that it is compatible with the old system with a few caveats of like, that's why we had to create the new floors, was to implement all of the new functionality that we're doing. But any of these wood walls would fit with any of our previous corner posts and floors that anybody already has.
Yeah, it's all the same footprint, but we thought of a few ways to be able to add additional things. And the main thing is, so like that scaffolding system that he was showing, we made pilings for it so they can be docks. If you biscuit them onto the side of a floor, they can be wraparound balconies. If you put them between buildings, they can be like walkways, like above ground.
Yeah.
And there's like a rope bridge that can hang from them as well.
And
yeah, you can peg them on top of roofs and have widow's walks like on tops of buildings.
If you really want to do a rooftop chase or a rooftop fight, one of the cool things you can do is like how this system at the top of this, right, is all able to peg together. It is all able to exist as one central unit because you have these holes at the top of the pieces and at the bottom that then like sync it together. So this becomes one solid unit. You can lift it off, you can push it everywhere. But also what I've talked about a couple of times with some people on like the Discord or whatever is that it's like I kind of can't wait to have even a full 12-inch by 12-inch battle board, like, terrain tray like this, set aside, and it's just roofs connecting to each other. Like, if I don't really need the buildings, and I just want to do a really cool roof, like to roof maneuvering system, and I'm not worried about what's underneath, then that's a great way to try to do it, because you can really just move from one thing to one thing and have scaffolding and have a lot of other ways to do it. So yeah. Again, hope that wasn't over-explaining.
No. No, it's super dope. And also, literally what people paid to see. So,
yeah. I don't want to... Are you kidding me? Oh, yeah. And then there's also there's buried metal sheets in a lot of the main roofs. So for instance, right here and in this one as well. So you could put this right here, and now that becomes an extra little perch that you can stand on or extend additional platforms on top of. So
is that magnetic?
Yes.
That's
That's cool.
Yeah, and then you can have like little
magnets. How do they work?
Yeah,
sorry.
Exactly. So it's a fun thing because, like, yeah, one of the big things we wanted to do is we wanted to make the roofs like way more playable than they were in the past.
Correct.
And so by making this like double wide perch, you can not only stand a mini up there, but it actually has a biscuit hole in it, so you can connect the scaffolding to it and have like walkways coming out from this roof. And so you'll see some of the pictures and videos that we got like on the site. Like, we'll have like entire like rooftop runs that go around like the entire edge of the city.
Yeah.
And so you can be on the ground floor, and then a bunch of assassins like are running along like these rooftops above you. A lot of fun stuff.
Absolutely.
But yeah.
Well, and there's a couple of people who talked about it, and I'm always nervous to discuss it or to say it, but there's been questions about like how this stuff pairs with other biomes that we have too, like the forest or the swamp or how does this actually work inside your caverns or your dungeons. And recently, I guess just yesterday, we did some stuff where we were working with the other biomes, and it's a lot more fun than I thought it was, in terms of like I didn't realize how much it actually integrates really well with a bunch of other things. And somebody was asking, like, are you guys going to do like a treehouse or something, right? Like, are you going to build like? I was like, well, I guess technically, you could kind of do that. Like, you could set up, especially when you have these platforms which can be independent. Like, you can actually pretty much set up a lot of that by yourself, and as long as it supports the weight. Because physics still exists for any of these pieces.
Whether or not it exists in the world you are
whether
building,
or not it's a thing that you want to have apply.
I roll to disbelieve.
Yeah.
How is it affected by 3 moons?
How is
That's
it only balances at low tide.
Exactly. You have to appease Umberleaf for to balance. Yeah, that's what I was getting at when I was asking about the previous sets. I didn't want to push it and then have you be like, no, that doesn't really work.
No, yeah,
like, oh, well, now I'm that guy.
Well, actually, let me show you another compatibility thing we did.
Are you showing the?
I'm going to show
Kashyyyk thing?
I'm going to show the Kashyyyk
Awesome.
build we did. Where is it? It's in here somewhere.
I'll put these guys on top. Yeah, and this thing's magnetic too, so you can actually put like trapdoors on your roof as well if they have magnets, which is cool.
So
awesome.
We've been doing a bunch of wargaming stuff.
Can I live there?
What's that?
It's because of the books. Me too.
I said, can I live there?
Yeah,
it's totally the books.
It's just
it's the books. When,
the books and the secret doors.
Yeah.
Like my dream home.
Yep. Done.
So this is like with our wildlands forest terrain. One fun thing we did is those biscuit holes we were talking about, we also made backwards compatible with the paired pegs that we used for
Wildlands.
for wildlands, like mountain stuff. So you can peg the scaffolding onto the sides of mountains, basically, which we've done here. We've got like a scaffolding platform on the side of this Titan's Tooth rock from Wildlands.
Yep.
And so you can climb up there, get on the scaffolding platform, start taking this rope bridge across, and that just leads into like a scaffolding run, like through the whole like forest, which is pretty sick.
Every time we get to a new Kickstarter, we have like, all right, we're gonna add this piece functionality, and then it's like, how do we carry that to the next thing? And so most things are an evolution of one idea into another idea because those those biomes have like a different consideration. So that's kind of been the fun part of this one is seeing how Wildlands affected this, or how Dungeons affected Wildlands, and that kind of stuff. Like how those things all morph together. For instance, not to talk about it again, I don't want to, I'll have a little bit of humility maybe someday. But like yesterday, we did like a little build jam, and it was utilizing our freestanding walls. I'll go grab 1 or 2 of those. So, these are wood walls that you can sort of freely position on top of your platforms with it's magnetic and they fit with each other, and so you can do a whole bunch of runs of walls without having to have specific floors. You can put that on a game mat if that's better because you want to have a grid or something like that. They're nice and useful for that. But you can also put that into your dungeons, and now it becomes destructible terrain, or now it becomes things that like, cool, I can deeply affect this thing, but is that going to negatively affect me too? As a DM, you can think about that, where it's like, oh yeah, you bust through the wall, but there was a sleeping troll there, obviously. And so it's
they
like
have a cave troll.
Maybe not the best idea to just go breaking down walls that don't belong to you. So
yeah, we did roll the giveaway Small Town Wizard one, which is a phenomenal name. Just wanted to shout that out.
That's an amazing name.
That is a great name.
Congratulations, Small Town Wizard.
Yeah,
you're gonna make it, kid.
So do you have
make it, kid? Literally.
Is there anything as a DM that seems particularly exciting about this to you, or that like you have any like questions like, oh, would I be able to do this?
Well, you literally just showed that, and then you showed the castle, and I was like, I want to see the place where that castle exists underneath this. That there's like a I don't know, a trapdoor you excavate in some way and discover, because it looked like it would fit right on top. And that idea of going down into the depths of that was a really exciting possibility.
my place went to this house surrounded by swampland. You know what I mean? Like you got to survive the swamp to get here to talk to the old sage. You know, which I think that's actually a way to look at this. Also, is I mean, Legos obviously are not just for kids. Obviously, Lego bricks, because it's singular for the people that are like really about that life. But you know, sometimes if you just pull the stuff out and just make something interesting and then go from there. Like you'd be like, what if the bookcases were on the outside? It's a secret door.
Yeah.
You know, immediately we're all like, ooh, ah. You know, it can inspire you as storyteller and also engage the people at your table.
Well, and to have the rooftop stuff, I have always wanted to do a town where all of the connections between buildings were above ground, where it was all
Right.
you know, rope bridges, and that's the transport where people don't use the ground.
Yeah.
I think there's just something really interesting and exciting about that, and that's something that it seems like this set is perfectly suited to do.
That's something we've been playing around with. We want to throughout the campaign, like we want to do some like bigger and more like more ambitious kind of crossover builds with some of our past terrain, because there really is just like a lot of. We did so much with this that we keep discovering new things that we can do with the repeating geometry and dropping into new context, and I think we still don't actually understand a lot of stuff about what we can actually do with these pieces yet, because we're still experimenting with them ourselves.
And additionally, again, when they're this sort of like prototype quality, like there is a nature to it where it's like, yeah, that doesn't fit perfectly flush. So there's, you know, there's some learnings there that we can't do until we have some of the other pieces. I think it was that you said Legos, and that really strikes a chord with me too, because I play regularly, or I guess I was playing regularly with
Legos,
with someone who struggles with aphantasia, and so a lot of the times, like I do like building stuff out as even just a conceptual understanding of what a building, what is there, right? This player is totally fine with theater of the mind stuff, but it's like, sometimes he was saying to me like, is this going to be an important feature? And I was like, yeah. And he's like, it would kind of help to have it drawn out or listed in some fashion of like how that actually affects the rest of the stuff. So it's like, you know what? Yeah, even just for geography's sake, let's build the building, right? Like let's build it out and let's show it off and say, here's the thing, and you can affect whatever you want and just ask about, you know, point at a thing and ask about it, and we'll see what's going on. And I think that's kind of my favorite part of this system, is that it adds more to that bucket of let's build something to just sometimes even just look at.
I have visuospatial processing issues, so I have trouble when I'm imagining things. It's not that I have aphantasia where I can't imagine, where I can't picture something in my head, but I have trouble with the locations of things in that space, especially in combat. I can get very disoriented with where creatures are, and so I totally get that. But even more exciting for me is having the multiple levels in a tactile form, because when I was writing Candlekeep, one of the hardest things about that dungeon, I literally took out a laundry rack and had objects on it to represent rooms with tags on them to write on it, connected with strings. It was like a 3D version of the It's Always Sunny conspiracy board. Because I kept trying to draw the map and I could not do it. I came from isometric, so isometric mapping helps a little for me.
Oh, sure.
But I really needed the 3 dimensions to get the different levels and what connected to what and how, in order to even conceptualize what the whole of my dungeon looked like, and to make sure that the physics of it made sense in terms of this thing goes to that thing, and spatially they would work.
I guess that's an interesting, like, is that, you're saying you were having to even just do that when you were writing? Like when you were, wow, that's so cool though. Like,
well, because we did maps with the designs we were doing so that they could have, you know, they could have cartographers actually draw the maps, but so that we could communicate the layout of what we wanted our dungeons to look like.
Oh, I love that. That's super cool.
And yeah, and there are tricky
Three-dimensional
things about
thinking.
my dungeon. Yeah, that you needed to know. I needed to have it very clear what was within certain ranges of sight
Yeah.
and movement.
I think that's generally just helpful because even I feel like there's never a situation where somebody's ability to process what's going on in a scene is harmed by having it physically represented in some form.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There's some people who handle theater of the mind better, but I still don't think even in those cases that it's ever a detriment to have like some form of guide, even if it's just like sketching something out on graph paper. Like
Because the truth is, it's like, yeah, you could be a beautiful storyteller and give me the perfect picture.
and I am. Yeah.
I don't get what you're saying. Am I close to the thing? And you're like, yeah, you're close to the thing. Great. This is what I'm doing to it. Because like sometimes that's where I get with some like flowery prose that happens at some tables where it's like sometimes actually what these people need at the end of the day is really just this thing is this, you are this close, would you like to affect it? And they say, I'll get closer and I'll affect it. So sometimes, every table's different and every culture is different in that every table culture is different. So there's no shade, there's no problems with that. It's just like, yeah, I think it's just preference.
Perfect.
Yeah, I saw a question in the chat a while back about what you build, what you draw, and what you just play theater of the mind. And for me, sort of, I think that's a really great question. The things I would build, I have had those times where I have spent 10, 15 hours before a session preparing something really amazing for my players who then decided not to go behind that door.
Yep.
And so I sort of have settled on the places that I know for sure that they will be going at some point. The place where I know the big boss fight's going to happen.
Yeah.
Go ahead, B. Dave's got something.
I would say that's also why I say keep the build covered. Keep it covered. So they're like left, right, up, down, wherever. You're like, what a surprise. It's still this way. Who'd have thunk? Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely.
Interesting question
But,
from. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Were you? Did you have anything else to?
No, that's sort of what it is. Is like I keep that for what I know are going to be showpiece scenes or sequences that are kind of inevitable.
Because otherwise you'd be building every
the
day.
mid-sized stuff, I'll use a grid, and then for smaller stuff, I'll just the random encounter. I'll let it be a theater of the mind.
Well, it's like I don't make a handout for everything. Right, I don't always do that.
Yeah.
It's like if I'm doing this, it's again the purpose of our engagement, our enjoyment of this moment. Yeah.
Got one more question, then I think I'm gonna start kind of wrapping us up so we can get out of here. Feel Squeaky is asking, are the pieces stable enough to be used as tactile cues for the visually impaired?
Awesome question.
Which, and Jen, I actually wanted to kind of ask you if there are any particular considerations in regards to this, because I don't know that I've thought about it in this way. So I think I would actually like to understand more about like where this is coming from.
And
go ahead.
The phrasing of the question is the tactile, like how it feels.
Yeah, it's.
Okay.
I think the question is relating to things like tactile mapping, which is something that I've talked a bit about previously. And in the accessibility kit, we included a 3D pen for people to map on their grids to make 3D grids, because I know some blind DMs use that when they have a table that's a mix of blind, low vision, and sighted players, so that they can count squares and things like that. But yeah, I think anything that can give an indication, first of all, to the shape of a combat or of a location, but the literal texture, but higher contrast, both in terms of color and color schemes, and in terms of the textures of things, is always great. Blind and low vision folks tend to be, not always, none of these are universal statements. These are sort of general best practices, but tend to be very good and perceptive at tactile sensitivity. It's why most sighted folks, you give them Braille, they could not read it without a lot of practice. You just don't have the specific sensitivity of finding those things in the way that folks who rely on tactile cues for getting through their day have developed those neural connections and processing. So there are details that blind and low vision folks will pick out that sighted players won't get by looking at a piece. But yeah, I think having tactile props is always wonderful on a multitude of levels for folks with different disabilities. We were talking about aphantasia, for visuospatial concerns, for ADHD, for blind low vision folks. Just there are so many benefits to having tactile cues at a table and having visual cues that help give character to a place. Absolutely.
I think going off of that, what I would say then is, as far as stability goes, we put anchor magnets on the bottom of basically any of our pieces that are supposed to be ground level. So if you're using a metal terrain tray or something, it will stop those things from getting knocked over most of the time. And then also we make our stuff very durable as well. So even if it does get knocked over, it's not really going to break. And we also do texture our pieces like a good amount, which might help with that.
It's a huge part of the texturing of any of our pieces is a huge part of like also the paint. So like you'll find a lot of subtlety in even just, you know, this one piece has a bunch of wood grain in there that you could probably actually end up feeling. I'm not certain. I genuinely don't want to, you know, talk it up more than it really is. I just mean to say, like, there is such a degree to the quality of each piece and each sculpt that, like, I could see it being a thing, but we should probably have better conversations with some of that community to even just like test that.
I think it's something that's worth talking about internally. Yeah, B-Dave?
What I think they're asking, at least an aspect of what I think they're asking, is like when you picked up the roof of that building, it clearly like shook a little bit, and they was like, is this stable enough that a person can touch it and be like, ooh, I know what this is now, without it collapsing?
Yeah, and that's
at least an aspect of what I think they were.
That's going to differ piece to piece for sure. Is you know, to be fully clear, like even this, right? Like I can scoot this thing. I can mess with it. Now, again, the nature of this stuff is prototypical, so it's not the best. It's not the most clean cut. When we get into our Dwarvenite, when we actually get to those pieces where they are perfect planes and they sit next to each other, and these holes, these biscuit holes were nearly unmanufacturable from our prototype side. So it's like they are not all great.
Yeah, for context, when we do the Kickstarter, what the Kickstarter is for is to get the funding to make the molds to produce this in the final material that we like and with like factory precision. This is resin where the holes have been like a lot of the holes and all this stuff has been like taken out like by hand, so it's not terribly precise.
So there's
and I
also,
want to.
Please, sorry, Jen. Please.
Sorry, I just want to add one other thing, which is I think there's a stereotype to dismantle here as well, which is I think people often are presented with the depiction of blind people sort of groping and fumbling for things. More than 80% of the blind low vision community and some groups say over 90% have some degree of vision. And in addition, when you live your life blind, it's very different than if a sighted person were to suddenly become blind. And when you come home from the eye doctor and you're extremely light sensitive and kind of have to move around feeling for things. It's a very different experience in terms of the way that people move with intention. As a DM or as a fellow player, you can say, hey, at your 3 o'clock, there's a piece. It's got some fragile pieces. You might want to be delicate with it when you touch it. It's not like someone's going to go and smash their hand down on it in the way that often it's depicted in media, which is really inaccurate. So I think that it's important to note that that's sort of
I do
not how most people behave.
And really just the idea of structural stability too. It's the point of all the pegs. It's the things of like, hey, if this entire roof can be linked together as one unit, that's great, and it can do that. It's able to move as one solid unit. It's able to be seamless, and to that point, it's like, and yeah, you are more than able to touch it. But yeah, I don't see why it would. I can't. Again, it is still like, I would still say that like there's some piece specificity where it's like this is potentially less stable than something like this at the end of the day, because it's built with just those things in there and they're just holding it up. So it's like, yeah, it's going to be situational, and I think the tables that actually, correct me if I'm wrong, Jim, but the tables who are actually playing, who are who would have that as a consideration, it's a consideration that they are already dealing with, right? Like it's something where
again,
it's like,
I think there's a lot of communication at those tables generally.
Right.
As long as people are communicating their needs, you also get familiar with what folks need in terms of how you're describing something. If you're showing them where something is, like, it's just the communication of, hey, this piece is more fragile. Hey, by the way, this piece shifts. Just be aware. But you also would want that if you had your sighted players coming up.
Absolutely,
looking at stuff and maybe picking it up. You might want to go, hey, that piece is not connected.
Like it if you
don't.
Yeah. So that is one thing I would
please
say.
Don't, or please use caution. So.
Yeah, that is one thing I would say is, when you picked up that roof, none of those roof pieces are currently connected together. They are just kind of sitting freely, which is why they wiggled a lot more. But the whole point of the system was to make it so you could securely attach all these with the pegs and basically turn that roof into a solid piece that you could pick up as one unit without it falling apart. So that should be very helpful in that respect. And then again, the nice thing is we make our stuff so that if it drops, they might like come apart at the connections, but you can just reconnect them. Like the pieces themselves shouldn't break. And I think that is like really interesting. There's another they had a follow-up asking if we would do like color enhancement to help the visually impaired. I do know we do try to go with high contrast just because we think it is like the most visually interesting in the first place. But I think personally, like, I don't think that we've really thought about it from this angle before, and that might be an interesting thing too.
I can honestly say that I wouldn't ever want it to be a thing that we said we already thought of, because it's just not. It's not, that wouldn't be true. Like it is not something that has come up in our design schemes. I think that is largely going to be based on some just actually in what I'm so sorry. I'm trying to actually investing in that conversation happening and just and seeing what that means and what that could actually, if that benefits someone else, then why not? Jesus.
That's the thing about accessible stuff is it's not. It doesn't have to be clinical. It doesn't have to be boring. It could be really beautiful stuff that's cool for everybody, and that's part of what's awesome about it.
I know, and I know that some of our stuff is like, hey, we've made, this scaffolding is a different kind of process that we put in, like in the painting. It's a different process than we put on this wood building. For instance, this wood is meant to be a rustic kind of something that you'd see on a building every day, and it's a little worn maybe in places, but it's ultimately a rich kind of brown color whereas this one, it's like, that's the dockside stuff. That's like the crap wood that you get in the back, and so it's got run down, it's got like dark edges and all these things. So like we create even in that, like it is pretty much the same base colors, but the difference of where we place that, where you place the washes, where you place the, different kind of highlights and stuff. So I think that's an incredible thing to bring up.
That tells a story for everybody, though. The different textures, different tactile things. Whether the colors, the degree of the contrast of color, it tells a story for everybody. About the location and the world, and it's awesome. I love it.
That's super cool.
And it would be awesome if more folks find new ways to play because these things exist, and I think they're awesome tools to help further that, because you can feel the shape of locations and cities and things that you can't do if you're playing in a 2D map.
And at the risk, I'm struggling because I'm also like, we do also have unpainted offerings too. So like, if there is something where you're like, I love this design and I need it to go to this other, I need it to get punched up. I need it to do that so that this can happen. It's like, I don't want to force people to do work, but like, if that is a way that people can also get that accessibility, then great. Like, I would love to be able to provide stuff like that too. Maybe we could do like paint guides that also try to dwell into that area too. It's just try to say, here's how you can.
Yeah, we've got like a series of painting videos. It could be interesting to delve into. Maybe have somebody guest on, where it's like, here are painting tips.
Anybody who knows, who's part of that like, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Thank you, Jen. That's a great. And also, who asked the question?
No, that was Full Squeaky who asked that question.
Full Squeaky. Okay, so
thank you.
Yeah,
thank you for that.
That's a great
those
question.
Awesome questions, Full.
Yeah, I hadn't thought about things from these angles. We should probably. Oh, Lauren's here. Hi, Lauren.
Just in time.
Just in time. Yeah, we should. The last question, which I think is a good way to also help wrap up, is for both Jen and B Dave. As a newish DM who learns by emulation, do you have any particular episodes or sessions of your own games that you're particularly proud of that I can go watch for learning? Bonus points for city or noir environments, which I know there's some noir involved, at least in stuff that Dave's done.
Episode 1 of the Black Dice Society very, very clearly had to debut a whole new place. So yeah, we brought the town of Kretchmer to life in the first episode of the Black Dice Society. Yeah. And we see it multiple times over the course of the show.
What about you, Jen? Any particular work that would be that you're proud of that somebody could go watch to learn from?
I mean, I'm incredibly proud of what we did with Gale Song. To my knowledge, it's the first time there's ever been a bilingual English ASL table on a stream. Yeah. And it just, there's all sorts of, we just did a bunch of really neat stuff on that project, and I'm incredibly proud of it. That was 2 years in the making. And also what we do on Children of Erte every week. I think those are some of the most nuanced characters. I also did, I DM'd a very silly adventure from Gamehole Con a few years ago, where I sent people to a domain of dread that was a shopping mall.
The most terrible.
The worst of all domains. And that was a lot of fun. Yeah, I don't know. It's hard to pick one thing. You know what I am really proud of, too, is that I did a video about 10 Candles on the MCDM channel. And I got to spend half an hour raving about my favorite indie game and why it's phenomenal and what you can learn from playing a game like that.
Awesome.
Amazing.
I've been able to... okay. That's a new one for me too. Great.
Right, perfect. Yeah, so go check out.
It's hands down my favorite indie game. Like there's nothing nothing holds a candle to it. It's so good.
Black Dice Society is on Wizards' YouTube channel. Yes.
Yep.
Yes. Awesome. Well, guys, thanks for coming out. Once again, B Dave and Jen, plug where they can find you and anything you want them to. Anything you want to plug right now, and we'll take it out.
Sure. I am Jen Kretchmer. You can find me on most socials as @DreamWisp. You can find me streaming on Twitch as DreamWispJen. And every Tuesday at 6 p.m. Pacific, you can find me on Demiplane RPG's channel on Children of Erte. And then I've got some other cool stuff coming up that I will announce on Twitter when I can announce.
Awesome.
B. Dave Walters, you can find me everywhere. This Monday, starting on the C&E Games Twitch, is The Fury of the Black Rose with the aforementioned Gabe James, Ellen Rose, Johnny Chiodini, Rhiannon Frost, and Mr. Mark Humes, which is going to be fine. I'm sure nothing terrible is going to happen to them on cribs. Don't even worry about it. You should just come and see how we're just going to have 6 successive shopping episodes, and that's going to be that.
In a mall domain of dread?
And spoiler alert, right? That's all Korea is. You know what I mean? It's a giant shopping mall with Takesis and Soft kind of battling for control of the food court. You know, that's what it's gonna be. Also, like I said, pinned at the top of my Twitter at @BDaveWalters. I've done courses on DMing, playing, and writing that will probably help you quite a bit. So take a look. And back this Kickstarter if you haven't already. It's already wildly successful, but there's 13 days left. It can be more wilder successful.
As most people say, wilder. Yes.
That was our last
Wilder.
As we do. Wilderer. Yeah, there's still time. Yeah.
But yeah, as B-Dave said, Cities Untold Lowtown is going right now. There's a ton of stuff there if you're interested in bringing terrain to your games, or if you've got whether you've got any of our stuff or not. We would love to help you figure out.
Just get in here.
We'd love to help you figure out what would be good for you, what works for your budget, what works for the kind of games you're trying to play. Our Discord is incredibly active and helpful and full of backers who know our stuff better than we do and can give you a lot of great advice. Yeah, we'd love to have more people around and just get more perspectives and
here for any kind of game too, right? You know, we've got content that can be easily utilized for wargaming, for Dungeons and Dragons, Pathfinder, Lancer.
We use it for Lancer.
We use it for Lancer for ourselves, and so it's like there's a lot of different ways to utilize this stuff, especially if you want to get creative with. Yeah. Hey, I just want to get this dressing stuff and spice up my game mat. Then all for it. Go.
Oh, we just hit 1.95. Very close to the 2 million stuff unlocking, which is unfortunate because we're not going to have the thing we're supposed to reveal at 2 million shot until tomorrow. So I hope they.
Yeah, you guys better wait till tomorrow.
I know what you guys are doing
don't
today.
do it.
Yeah, no, I did. Finish it now. Do it now.
Don't give us 50 grand. I hate. No, don't do that.
Don't
Sleep
do
is for the weak.
No,
Shoot it
please,
down.
don't do that.
I can't.
Exactly.
I would hate it if people.
We're drowning in success. Yeah.
I'm also familiar with that unique burden, Chris.
Oh.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've got doing being involved in every major D&D event happening at the same time.
Your own game.
It's difficult.
It's
It's my cross to bear. Yep.
Well, Jen, B-Dave, thank you for coming on for this. This was a really nice conversation. Went in some ways I wasn't expecting either, which was really nice. It was a fun time.
Thanks so much for having
and
us.
thank you all for watching.
Yeah.
Thank you all for watching, and we'll see you guys later.
Or not.
Or not.